So I started realizing that if you can just find strength just a little bit longer, you will have a crew of people following you along the way.
And that is another thing that no one can ever teach you. Because you're going to have to learn that on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that energy out of your mind on your own. There's no book you can read that all of a sudden I have it. I've got the technique now. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
No, it's a grind that you have to start and finish on your own.
Let me tell you a story about an illiterate kid. Had guitar lessons at 3, living stateside at 6, bought a philosophy geek. Thought he was born with a gift, but over 20 years later thought I could no longer subsist. While destroyed by misfortune and locked down in his crib in the shadow of wealth, where the corrupt banks lived, a single flicker of hope was all that kept him awake, burning all through the night. Every second of every day the script changed underneath, but very few could see the story was telling himself. Friends just couldn't believe he was on another planet station they couldn't receive, and it never shut off. An eternal heartbeat, an undeniable call, an unquenchable flame, an unavoidable path. Del Toro quest for his age, he left a valley of lost frequency tuned to perceive, hacking into commits and finally bridging the breach. The code world in his mind, like first learning to read, like a lifetime of red suddenly turning to green. So he opened a branch and turned over a leaf, auto passing the test like a database seed. A book that never been authored, movie never been played, a journey no one else living would ever seek to replicate, song that never been sung, vision he could retain. So it consumed his mind like a triumphant parade. All the Christmas and Easters and birthdays that he missed, paid the isolation price to become the man that he did. So a piece of advice, you should take care what you wish. When you pick up abroad, then you better not miss. Could be in China or Chile, or in mountains of mist, walking into the fog, or ending up a night of whist. But I've got no regrets that it was written like this. Quantum entangled in, all crafted threads are in synths. In the mountains or seas, the battlements are parapets. In the words of my friends, a ribonucleic helix. In the dance of the stars, or eternity's whim. Cause it's all in my mind, in mithril titanium. You know, when I was about 9 I learned to play violin. You consider it in this song played by a computer sim. So whatever the cost, whatever the sin, whatever the angels on the head of a pin, whatever the rush, whatever the strings, whatever the throne, politicians or kings, whatever the price, death comes from within. So I'll burn it all down, but I'll never let them win.
If you keep on attacking something, nothing wants to stand in front of anything that is relentless. Nothing.
No management, no studio, no corporate sponsorships, no old money connections, and no Andreessen Horowitz, no mentor, no prior art, and no industry experience, no safety net, no backups, and no certifications, no rulebook, no limits, and no establishment. Just a single laptop and syndication of speech. They say that changing the world, that's maybe not realistic. Dying a day at a time in siren songs of indecision. The prophet Isaiah said, may a civilization. The Manhattan bomb, knowledge versus imagination. You might be missing my message, rephrase the honest truth. If they have selected the offense, and you are their squid. People worship the state, parasitic blood-sucking leeches, begging for mafia handouts, goaded by tiny television. Everything demanded free, someone else did the working and building. It got stolen from them to fund this entitled lisping. We're always being trapped and everything is forbidden. You can get wrecked anytime, selectively forced into prison, while the people are censored. The deep state's its omniscient. Is this the kind of society that we all want to exist in? But we gotta fight on till we're dead in the ditches. Cause I'd rather die free than see tyrants any inches. You know the system's corrupt, basically physically sickening. People toiling their lives, giving their time to the rich list. So it's live and you're living in a modern day myth. Call it a Aeneid of joy or an epic odyssey of grief. The Argonauts getting fleeced, the Brits are lifting the ships. global hyperinflation. This is history being writ, a sea of NPC drones, subconscious ruled by elites against remaining humanity. Maybe we give them a glimpse, so go and speak to the remnant, the ones rising to resist. Critical mass of civilians, this madness can no longer persist. All we need is a moment, a single crack or a split, some undeniable testimony that Xerxes can bleed. This is crossing the chasm, it's the end of the grift. Freedom hangs in the balance, and our choice is the difference. And if you don't like it, don't give a fuck what you think, cause this one is for the future, for the parents and kids. Is it Plata or Plumo? Is it pistols or pistons? Know that the jackals will judge you, and so will you.
There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
That's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 107. Eric Wall Orb response. Today is Sunday, the 4th of February, 2024. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jett is doing the producing. No guest today because although we sort of have a pseudo guest, which is Eric Wall's contributions on Twitter and online, but we'll get into all that. Essentially, I'm going to do a full breakdown of, I don't really want to call it an incident because that makes it sound really negative, but this sort of developing situation we've had with me asking him a question through his orb. I'll explain all what that's about. What he said, he wrote a 2,500 word sort of essay in response, and I'm going to read out the full thing and then also give my own thoughts and then how other people reacted. Now, I'm very conscious that listeners to the show are coming into this situation. Some of them, I know the hardcore are right up to speed with this, but the vast majority don't have no context really on any of this, or maybe only some if you've heard me mentioning Eric Wall in previous episodes. So we're going to go through it right from the start. As per usual, we got to just quickly check in with the price. So today, Bitcoin Cash is $236.32 US cents, which is flat. One BTC is 181.4 BCH, which is down slightly, and one Ethereum is 9.7 BCH, which is flat. Now, before we get into it, Jett, do you just want to give a little update on, I don't know, how you're doing? And also, what's your context coming into this for curious listeners?
All right, so how I'm doing. If you guys listen to the General Protocols Twitter space I did close to a month ago now, no update from there. Still slammed, too busy for my own good. And still like eager and open to do new things. So it seems like every time I'm like, no, maybe I shouldn't. I'm still going to end up doing it anyway. So got to figure out time management. That's the next skill I got to work on. But as far as me going into this, I feel like I'm the audience. My exposure to Eric Wall is just what we cover on this podcast. I never followed him beforehand. I didn't ever watch any of his videos or podcasts. I would get little spicy clips here and there, maybe if it was making its rounds on Twitter. But aside from that, I just get to kind of enjoy the chaos of this show. So I don't know. I mentioned this before we started filming too. It was kind of interesting to see how excited people were to get Eric's response to all this, and seeing not just from the Bitcoin Cash people, but from all these different communities being like even some people being like, Eric admits that big blocks were the way to go, which was absolutely not what was said. But so
we'll get to that.
Yeah, I kind of get to watch this as just someone without any kind of social skin in the game, which is nice.
Callisti says your mic's a little bit quiet. And yeah, hi to Richard Mullins and everyone in the chat. Jeremy versus Eric rap battle when, I don't know, maybe better rap battles of history. I'll have to fill that in for us. I don't know. Okay, so let's start at the start then. Who is Eric Wall, right? So wait, he's obviously not here.
2 seconds. This might be too loud. We're just gonna have to try it. How's this? Can you guys hear me better now? I know for you, Jeremy, it's gonna be the exact same, but
if I turn it up, Jeremy, is loud.
Okay, perfect. Loud and clear.
Okay, all right. So, all right. So let's start at the beginning here then. So who is Eric Wall? So my understanding of Eric Wall actually kind of came into the picture a bit late because he is a former laser eye small blocker. So in the whole Bitcoin versus, Civil War, the block size war, 2015 to 2017, he was on the small block side, and not just in passing, but very, very passionately so. And he jumped on board the whole hype train with the laser eyes. And I guess he spent a lot of time explaining that big blockers were wrong and all that. I was actually mostly unaware of that because he might have been big on Reddit. I don't know. But I don't think so. He basically was big on Twitter, which is where the conversation moved to after all the Reddit censorship and so forth, right? And even at the time, I don't think he was super big in the Twitter discussion there. He got quite big by calling out Richard Hart's scam Hex as a scam, and then the Hex community all piled onto him, and then he trolled them back, and then through that way, got a lot of Streisand effect and got sort of known in crypto, right? Through that, at least in part. I've heard him talk about that before, right? So he was, maybe not so much in the zeitgeist. At least maybe his perspective would be different. I don't know, but from my perspective anyway, he wasn't actually that big in the block size war, but somehow or another he became big. And then by the time I jumped onto Twitter in 2021, which was already kind of down the line, he already had a significant following, especially among the small block laser eye guys, and he was very proudly on that side. Now, he started to realize that was the wrong side, or maybe I'm mischaracterizing what he would say about that, but he started to realize there were some problems with that point of view in the sort of 2021, 2022, maybe later in 2022 period. And subsequently, he co-founded Taproot Wizards with his mate, Udi Wertheimer. So as his process of unraveling all these sort of lies and even just misconceptions he had, the way he thought it was going to play out sort of started to come apart, right, as the crypto narrative went along. Not everyone can afford to be as consistent as the Bitcoin Cash podcast, which has one message, which is mostly correct. Everybody else is sort of figuring it out in real time, right? And so he was then quoted in our intro last year. So for anybody who knows where he says that whole lightning versus big blocks war, like, were we the bad guys? Were we the ones that weren't listening? That's him. That's Eric Wall, right? So he kind of started to realize that this whole Lightning Network stuff was bullshit, and he had been overhyped, and he'd sort of bought into the Kool-Aid there, and he started realizing that the laser eyes were anti progress and had sort of sabotaged Bitcoin in various ways. So he started up Taproot Wizards with his mate Udi Wertheimer, and they then had a huge impact through the ordinals thing, right? We're now at a situation where there are multiple competing camps in the BTC side, but the earliest fragmentation that became publicly visible so much was kind of the laser eyes, who are the classical toxic maximalists, the small blockers, descendants from the block size war, and then now there's the taproot wizards, right, who were happy to have ordinals and were sort of thinking maybe we should upgrade the protocol, maybe we should try and get some of this innovation that happened in Ethereum and in DeFi into Bitcoin, right? And where did we get lost along the way, such that Bitcoin was once a progressive chain, like I've talked about on this show many times. The original maximalism and the way it still is in BCH is you've got to pay attention to your competition. If they're doing good stuff, you should take that on board and try and learn and innovate from that, right? But Eric started to realize, wait a second, I'm in the same boat with all these guys who are saying, we're not going to change things. Bitcoin is perfect money, 21 million, store of value is going to take over the world, blah, 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 right? So he became a bit disillusioned with that. Now, he's also been not maybe heavily involved in so much, but he's very aware of, and, well, I don't know actually the details, but he's a bit more involved in Ethereum, right? He's not one of those people who's just shut off the rest of crypto. It's all scams and I disavow all of it. He's been paying attention to Ethereum and likely invested in it and follows what the development that goes on there. He has a lot of respect for the Ethereum developers and the Ethereum community and so forth. So he's trying to bring some of that into BTC because he can see that there's a lot of value and a lot of things going on there that a lot of the laser eyes just are completely either oblivious to or actively just dismiss it all as scams, right? Now, he has a pretty big Twitter following. Like I said, at the time when the podcast started, it was, I don't know, maybe like 80 or 90,000. Now it's about 140,000. And he's very influential in the broader crypto conversation, right? As a result of firstly being involved for quite a long time, but also being quite controversial with the whole Taproot Wizards thing. It's, he's got a lot of clout. He's got a very big voice in the scene, right? And from a quite an interesting vantage point, right? Because he's sort of in the BTC camp, but some of them are also trying to reject him. And at the same time, he does have exposure to the other scenes, but he's not really deep on any of those. And as far as I know, he's not really a developer at all. I'm sure he might have poked around with technical stuff a little bit, but he's more of a sort of commentator type, I guess I would say. Like, he knows a lot and he does a lot of research and so forth. But as far as I know, he's not a programmer. He hasn't built any apps sort of directly, but obviously he has enough money and resources or that he can hire other people to be involved in his projects, such as the Taproot Wizards. He's just more of like an intellectual is really maybe the word. He's more of a thinker, but that's the thing. Besides his Twitter account, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't have his own podcast or his own platform in that sense. He does go on other people's things, and sometimes the Taproot Wizards host Twitter Spaces. But he's not in the podcaster camp. He's not in the dev camp. He's not in the sort of entrepreneur camp necessarily. Again, he does have Taproot Wizards, but he's just in a sort of unique middle ground between a lot of different things, both in terms of his influence in the scene as well as his place within crypto. Now, you also need to understand that he has a very, like I said, he's quite intellectual. He really likes debates and reasonable arguments and that kind of thing. But he also has quite a combative personality, which is, of course, probably magnified on Twitter, as it is for many, many people. But even outside of Twitter, he has himself acknowledged that he has quite a combative personality, and that does play into the way that he sees the world and so forth. And he loves getting in dunks on people who make claims that are then proven wrong, and you can shit talk them afterwards and say, haha, you were wrong, and so forth. So he is, well, we'll see. That sort of plays into the rest of everything that kind of happened, and we'll see some more examples of that in a minute. So I think that's the rough. Again, that's obviously in my words. I don't want to put any words in his mouth. Everyone else can look at his content and his Twitter feed and watch podcasts with him and stuff. There's a bunch out there, and get get his version of himself. I'm never gonna give the full picture of somebody else for them, but that's my basic explanation. Jett, is that making sense, or is there something missing?
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything. I think I know him the most for the stuff on the next slide. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's the basics of it. That's Eric Wall. Okay. Now, Eric, being who he is, he has these sort of different projects and long-running interests, I guess you could say. So we're going to fill in a bit of the context here. It's really important to understand what happens later. So the first is he has his Tungsten Cubes series. So like I said before, he loves debates, and he also likes predictions. He makes a predictions thread every year, or he has for the last couple of years. In the last year, he made 30 predictions, and he got 22 of them right. And this is from a broad array of things, like, what would Vitalik be interested in? What would the crypto scene move in? Sometimes he predicts the prices. Sometimes he predicts a random different chain will just suddenly rise into prominence. A lot of different things like that. And getting 22 out of 30 is pretty good. And I think the year before that, he maybe also got 22 out of 30. And he's just published his 2024 one. So people who are interested can look into that, right? But so he does like predictions and thinking about the future and so forth. I guess like a lot of people who were early into crypto, right? They were very future oriented. So when he needs to call out somebody who has like a really stupid opinion that he wants to provably demonstrate like you're an idiot and really rub it in, he has this thing where he bets them a tungsten cube. So tungsten is the most dense metal, or maybe element, by volume, if I'm remembering right. So even a very small amount of this metal is ridiculously heavy. And it became this kind of meme in the Bitcoin community that was a cool thing. Tungsten was a cool thing. So he started this series of tungsten cube bets. So if he encounters somebody who is making some stupid, outlandish, ridiculous claims, and he wants to put them in their place, he will say, would you like to bet a tungsten cube on this, right? So I think the actual cost of the cubes, I think they do like 1.5-inch cubes or something like that, is maybe $500 or something. And he says that that's kind of about the right price point, where it's not really about the money, but it's significant enough that it's not just words on Twitter, right? So he has bet several people on various different things about these tungsten cubes. And as far as I know, he's won every time, because the way he does it is he makes a bet with somebody, and if he wins, they have to buy him one of these 1.5-inch tungsten cubes, and he gets their name and their face engraved on it so that he can forever after have his collection there and think, yeah, I just destroyed this complete idiot, right? But if the other person wins, which I believe so far nobody has, they win the entire collection. I think that's how it works. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think he said before that the idea is every person that he bets against, it's like they're putting up their one cube against his entire set. And if somebody beat him in one of these tungsten cube bets, he would give the entire collection to them. And then I guess that new person could maybe continue the tradition if they wanted, or, so it's really important to understand that it's a big deal for him that he has a flawless record. So right now, as far as I can tell, he's 5-0, I think, There might be, maybe there's one or two more, maybe there's 6 or 7, but in this photo that I've got, he's got 5 of them. And I don't think there's more. Maybe there's 6. I doubt there's 7, but that's his record, right? He's 5-0. So who has he been betting against? He's bet against Adam Back and Brad Mills and a couple other people that I don't even really know who they are or what all the bets were. But the key point is that they were mostly these sort of other laser-eyed BTC people, right? So you can understand how he's been able to win some bets against them because they have a lot of stupid takes. So he's capitalized on that and turned it into this thing about the tungsten cubes. So what he hasn't done, at least as far as I'm aware, is start tungsten cube betting against people outside of sort of the BTC space. It's more his way of dunking on the laser-eyed people. But the same concept could apply to anyone else, at least in theory. Now, he hasn't made any tungsten cube bets against me, and nor am I super interested in that personally. If he offered, I wouldn't, I guess it would depend on what the bet was. But in general, I think it's a cool concept, but I have no immediate desire to really be involved in this. Now, like I said, it's key that he has a flawless record and he wins all of them, which means that he has said before that he will only make a bet over the tungsten cubes with people once he believes, of course, it's just his opinion, but in his opinion, he's basically already won. And so the bet, like anybody who's on the receiving end of these bets should by now be very aware that he already thinks that they've completely lost, like with not even a small hope of coming back. But obviously the fun for him, like I said, he likes Twitter and he likes dunks and he likes intellectual debate, is that the person who's bet against him kind of spends the period of the bet trying to figure out like how or why they lost, which he already knew at the start, but they didn't know until later, maybe not until even after they have to actually give him the cube, right? That's kind of the fun for him. So maybe this is filling in a little bit of his, personality. What kind of person would A, come up with this system, and then B, heartily enjoy it? All right. It's a very cool, unique thing. Following me here, Jett?
I feel like it'd be fun for the first cube, and then you just end up with a bunch of these heavy fucking cubes. Like, if you want to move, sure, they're not big, but Jesus, that's just like so much extra weight that you gotta lug around. The novelty would wear off real quick.
Well, it would for you, but for him, it's like I now have a permanent record of these, all these people I've wrecked. So Eric has these tungsten cubes, right? Okay. Next thing. So Eric also has an orb, right? So what is an orb? I've got a picture of it here on the slide, although it's just a picture. It's the like purple floating sphere which has this liquid inside it, this sort of juice, and it sparkles as well too. Now that's just the picture on the website, but actually it's an Ethereum smart contract which you can buy it. He puts it on auction. He puts his orb on auction, and you can buy it if you outbid everybody else who tries to bid on it. And if you win, then you can ask Eric one question per week. It takes once you ask him a question, it goes on cooldown, and then nobody can ask him a question for another 7 days. And he has 7 days. He has that like recharge period to answer the question that he's been asked. So he has written on his website and in his, publicity of this, that this is his way of essentially charging people to ask him questions, right? But the point is that because he is bound to answer the questions, no matter what they are, with some exceptions, he's, you can't ask him like, what's the password to your Twitter account? Or you can't ask him like, how do I hack your best friend or something like that. You know, it can't be something that puts someone in danger or something like that. But it's a way of him making a sort of a kind of game out of people being able to ask him questions. Obviously, it also makes him money. The money that people bid on the orb, if they win, then goes to him. But I don't think it's really so much about the money. Obviously, he does make money from it, but I don't think that's his motivation to do it. Now, it's a super cool idea because he's trying to pioneer, or at least publicize or add weight to this idea of usable NFTs, right? We're familiar in crypto with NFTs, especially the broader crypto ecosystem, as just, you know, JPEGs is the common saying, right? Just buying the rights to a JPEG, which anybody can copy and paste. But anyway, you know, people argue over whether they own it and so forth. So that's got as far as it's got. But Eric is trying to move the conversation forward to, we should have more exciting things to do with NFTs than that, right? So this is his one way of doing that, is he's created this orb, which is not supposed to just be a display piece of artwork or a tradable piece of artwork. It's supposed to be a useful thing that has special significance and properties. Now, obviously, it's conceived of as an orb because he can kind of see into the future, or you can see into his mind, or however you want to conceive of it, with his orb, and it fits his theme of the Taproot Wizards, right? He is like, I'm a wizard, I have a magic orb. If you have my orb, you can ask me a question, right? So it all ties together. Now, he's not the only one who has an orb. He also has a couple of his other mates have got one. Nick Carter has one, and one or two others have one, although I'm not really too sure who they are. There's a couple of other ones, basically. There's maybe like 3 or 4 total. But he was the one who came up with it first. And so far as I know, the other ones that have orbs, also, it's the same deal. You get the orb, you can ask them a question. But he has said in the past that that's not essential to the orb concept, right? Like, maybe he would have somebody who would have some kind of different orb, who, you know, once per week, the owner of that orb could, you know, I don't know, ask a favor from the person whose orb it was, or they could, you know, I don't know what it would be. Maybe you could use someone's orb to tweet on Elon Musk's Twitter account if Elon had an orb, or something like that, right? Could be anything. Now, the important point about the orb in terms of accountability is that there is no direct mechanism or accountability if he falls through. So if somebody asks him a question, he has 7 days to answer, and he's promised that he will answer. And the question, or at least the introduction of a question, the hash of the question, is posted to the Ethereum blockchain when somebody asks it. So he has 7 days, and if he doesn't, then there's no like direct accountability, but there's indirect accountability, because somebody can say, look, here on the Ethereum blockchain, I asked a question, you didn't answer in this given window, so I'm calling you out. Like, your credibility is shot. And the point being that if his credibility, you know, takes that hit, then he will not be able to continue making money, or at least experimenting with this orb, right? But there's no like, you know, crypto police, or he hasn't locked like a deposit in the orb. That would be pretty cool if he did that, actually. If he put like 100 grand into the orb or something, if he didn't answer in 7 days, then it paid out the person who asked the question, or something like that would be kind of cool. But he hasn't done that, right? Now, there's another thing about this orb is, like I said, it's supposed to be about utility. So the idea is not that somebody could buy it and just hoard it or save it or whatever, like people do with these art NFTs. So his mechanism to stop that is a thing called Harburger taxes, which is basically when somebody buys the orb, like I said, they buy it at auction, right? So they buy it for a certain price, and then it has a certain amount of like juice in it, and that is constantly taxed away for owning the orb. So I can't remember. I just don't really know what the specifics are, but the tax rate is 600% per year. So if you buy the orb for 1 ETH, then it will constantly drain away your 1 ETH that you paid into it in like 2 months, right? Because it's 600%. So it would cost 6 ETH for 1 year if you kept topping it up to keep holding onto it for 1 year. And when you buy it, so if you buy it for 1 ETH, the tax is going to tax you at 6 ETH per year. So you run out in 2 months. And at the same time, because you bought it for 1 ETH, it also goes on auction again at like a higher price. Let me think. Is this right? So it goes on auction at a higher price. No, the tax rate is not set by how much you paid. Sorry. The tax rate is set based on how much you list it for sale. So you buy it for 1 ETH, and then let's say you list it for sale for 2 ETH, which means anybody else can come in and buy it off you for 2 ETH, but then you're being charged at 12 ETH per year. So you can set the price to steal it essentially from you as high or low as you want. But the higher you set the price, the bigger the tax that you're paying. So it's set up that not one person is going to just grab it and just hold on to it forever, because as you're holding on to it, your money is draining away. And if you put a low price to buy it, then it's obviously a better deal for somebody else to buy it and start asking Eric questions. Whereas if you put a really high price, it's going to cost you a lot. You run out of money sooner or later, and or Eric is getting rich, so he doesn't care if you hold on to his orb as much at some ridiculously high tax rates, right? So that's also very cool. I like this kind of experimentation with different economic concepts. It's very in the crypto ethos. Right. And there's one final element to the orb, which is that the answers, when you ask him a question with the orb, you can choose whether you want the answer to be public or private. So if you don't care, I guess the questions are always public, but the answers are either public or private. If you choose public, they'll be public. If you choose private, then only the owner of the orb can read the question that has replied, that he has replied to, right? So what that means is if somebody asks a private question and it says, so-and-so asked Eric a question, here's what the question is, and then it says private answer, then somebody else might think, I also want to know the answer to that question. So that's another incentive for them to buy the orb, because then they can read the previous private responses, obviously with some delay, because the person who originally got, like if somebody asked Eric, what's going to be the best investment in 2024, then the first person to get that info would have an advantage. And then if somebody else later bought it to get access to that secret info, they would obviously have it with some time delay. Now, when you buy the orb, you have the option to make the previous private answers, any or all of them, public if you choose to, which actually makes a lot of sense, because you kind of need to have that mechanism by default, because otherwise somebody could just buy the orb and just screenshot his answers and post them up publicly if they wanted to anyway. So it's kind of just codified into it that if you get the orb, you can either read the previous private answers, which maybe you just want to read and be the second person or the third person or the fifth person in the world with this access to this incredible wizardly knowledge, right? Or you can just say, fuck it, I don't care, and you can just publish it to the whole world. I think that's everything relevant about the orb. Does that make sense? Jett, any questions on that?
Nope. I think it's kind of cool with the harbinger taxes. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. And I think, again, I want to say, like, this is a super cool concept. I've liked this concept ever since I found out about it, which was quite a while ago. Now, how old is his orb? That's a good question. It's been around for a while, but he sort of put it out of commission for a little while. Let's see here. So somebody asked him a question 10 months ago, was the first question on January. Oh no, that's when I revealed it. Okay, so 10 months ago, basically, somebody asked him a question. So the first question he ever got asked for context was, imagine now creating an L1 where 100% of the coins would be distributed to the community. No allocations for VCs, insiders, team, or foundations. What would you consider to be the main challenges? And then he's written a whole 1,000-word sort of response to that. Now, this is you can check out the orb yourself, by the way, at eric.orb.land. And I think the others orbs are also there. So if you could just go to orb.land, you can look into all this yourself if you're thinking, well, this is pretty cool. I want to find out more about this. So anyway, he had the 10 months ago, somebody OX38C4 something bought it. And then 9 months ago, Paulie, PAWLE.eth bought it and asked him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. So Paulie.eth paid like tons of ETH. I think they paid 15 ETH to buy it and then asked him 7 questions. So they paid stacks of how much is 15 ETH? It's like 30 grand, right? I think they got some of it back. I don't think they held on to it the whole time, but well, you can see people some people really wanted to get Eric's advice, right?
Imagine making
although at the time I
wage
think the ownership
for answering 7 questions. Insane. All right, I'm launching an orb.
Well, you got to get an orb, Jett. You got to. Yeah, that's right. When's fucking Jett's orb? Like, let's go.
I'm not on Twitter,
it's
but
worth
if you want
mentioning that. Well, somebody already made a BCH orb, Jonas. Shout out to Jonas, who he thought this was a cool concept, so he made a proof of concept of it on BCH.
Okay, I think I remember.
A while ago.
Yeah, I remember his reply tweet, and it went over my head completely. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I'm glad this is a thing that we're kind of enticing people with, though. Maybe I'll take another look into that.
Yeah. So it is possible. Like, it is possible to do it on BCH. Obviously, with cash tokens and all that scripting upgrades and stuff. So it's possible orbs will come to BCH at some point, whether Eric launches them or, anybody else is free to do it, right? The concept is there. Okay, so currently, right, the orb is owned by somebody who has 1.559 ETH of funding in it. So they've got enough to last until February the 28th. Because they set the orb price to 4 Ethereum. So currently it's like about 8 grand, nearly like $9,000 to if you want to go and grab the orb yourself, like right now.
Wait, I have a
but
question.
It's also on cooldown. Yeah.
So if someone's like taxes or like their like the money that they put in to hold on to the orb.
The juice. Yeah. I think he calls it the juice. It's this purple stuff.
All right. So if the orb runs out of the lean, then
yeah. Yeah.
What does it just go on auction at a cheaper price? Oh, and then Eric has to.
I think if they run out, it goes back to him, and then he can like put it up for auction again.
Okay. All right.
Or maybe it automatically goes on auction. But if you run out of money, then it just goes back to him. But of course, like you would. That's the thing. So this guy has 1.5 ETH, and it covers until the February the 28th. So he would know that. I guess if he doesn't pay attention, it will just run out. But probably he's thinking like on February the 26th, I'm going to top up some more ETH into it if I want to hold on to it, right?
Gotcha.
Or maybe lower the price that I've got it set at so that so that I can extend my runway on my existing juice, right? And it's a very cool concept, like this whole thing. So if somebody buys you out, if somebody pays your orb price to get the orb off you, then if you set that at a higher price than you bought the orb, then you're making a profit as well. Eric's making a profit because he got the juice while it was running. But you're making a profit if somebody wants the orb badly enough to grab it off you. So it's also kind of cool that you can conceivably ask a question and get paid for having asked it, because the next person really wants to be asking the next question, or they want to read the private answers to the previous questions, right? Okay, so I think that's the full explanation of the orb, and that's going to come into it in a moment too. Okay, so that's Eric's crypto weaponry that he's got. He's got the tungsten cubes, and he's got the orbs, orb with the purple orb with the juice, the lean, like you said. Right. Now, I also have crypto weaponry, but it's of a different kind. So this is important context is I started a Twitter thread calling out Eric on the 19th of June, 2023. So the first tweet in this thread says, "Thread exposing Taproot Wizard's cognitive dissonance. The, quote, gigabrain Bitcoin rebels, end quote, frantically refusing to acknowledge hashtag Bcashes are right, always were. Thread grows / damage escalates till at Eric Wall or at Udi Wertheimer quote tweet this to beg surrender. Follows 4,655. And then I have a link to Money Printer Go Burr Caramel Dancin' meme tribute, which is a great video. You should look that up. Caramel Dancin' Money Printer Go Burr, which is this Japanese anime girl dancing around as those crying rage face emoji guys at the Fed like churn out new cash. So in this thread, which again is about 7 months old at this point, I started documenting lots of the stupid contradictory stuff that Eric and Udi said, basically, or they were saying, like as it went along. So as of right now, there's 24 posts in this thread, and the header post has 13.3 thousand views, which is not tons in the grand scheme of things, but it's been referred to enough times and it's been linked around enough places that it's got some decent traction. Now, it's important to note that I didn't just do this to be an asshole, even if Eric might think that. I only started this thread after I'd already tried on multiple occasions to talk to him and talk to Udi in a very friendly, approachable way, but they were completely ignoring me, right? And so if they were going to ignore me and not want to chat, well, then I was going to ramp up the pressure, to force the issue. So I started this thread, and I've been slowly documenting all the different copes and lies and cognitive dissonance. Were we the bad guys? We have the one in the intro this year, which is Vitalik asking them why can't we raise to 32 megabyte blocks. There's several other things in there, right? Some of the stupidest stuff they said, I've got it all screenshotted, all categorized, all archived. It's all there. Like I said, 24 posts. And then if Eric was saying some more stupid stuff, I would reply to him and I would put a link to the to this thread in there, so that if anybody else was reading what was going on and they were wondering why was I just coming at him with all this vitriol out of nowhere, they could see that this is the history of what's going on. This isn't entirely like without context, right? So yeah, I want to be very clear that firstly, I did try and engage with them the nice way, but they didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to do it the hard way. So I did this. And then secondly, neither of them really wanted to respond, because they could have stopped again. Like I put all the power in their hands. This is my version of the gamification of crypto. Is all the power is, they could have stopped it at any time. All they had to do was retweet and say please stop, and I would. Of course, I've put the cheese in the rat trap, right? Like to get me to stop, they have to retweet it to all their own followers and expose all the stupid stuff that they've said that I've documented, right? So it is a little bit of a cruel game in that way, but I only did that, like I said, and I even wrote in the thread, guys, look, I don't, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but if you're going to keep ignoring me, you're going to keep coming up with this stupid stuff, then this is the way it goes. And like I said, you have to know that Eric himself is the kind of person that loves Twitter dunks and screenshotting people from years ago. Haha, you said this wrong. The tungsten cubes is kind of the same thing, right? So it's not, like this kind of thing would be very cruel to do to, just your regular person. But Eric is the kind of personality that it's pretty hard for him to feel that it's, unjustified, or it would be pretty hypocritical of him not to really like this kind of thing, because he is one of the biggest purveyors of Twitter dunks and all that. Plus, as well, obviously, I have a far smaller account, which is also part of the issue. I only had, when I started the thread, I had 4,665 followers, and I put that in the header as well too, so that by the time he or Udi retweeted it to ask for surrender, people could look and see at what point did this become unbearable, right? Was it at 5,000 followers? Was it at 10,000? Was it at 100,000, right? I'm putting an implicit bet there that my account is going to keep growing, and therefore the pressure is going to ramp up. So it's it's like Saw, it's like Jigsaw. I've given him the keys to their own escape, but in a very cruel, inflicted way.
Hold on, you hear that, listeners?
We
need a meme of Jigsaw, but it's Jeremy going, Eric, I'd like to play a game.
Eric. Eric Wall, would you like to play a game? So yeah, there you go. That's anyway,
just coming out on the tricycle with like a Bitcoin cash.
I'm joking. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like I'm joking about it, but it is, in all honesty, this is custom designed for Eric, particularly, also partly for Udi, but particularly for Eric. It plays into every aspect of this. Like I didn't just do this randomly. Like I thought about this quite carefully. He loves Twitter. He loves dunking on people. He was ignoring me, and I had to get some way that he would pay attention. I'm sure I will see at some point. It would be interesting to get his takes on whether he thought this was at least interesting, or, like, you can see, similar to the tungsten cubes and the orb, it's a gamified intellectual challenge of a sort, and I thought he would appreciate that, at least, although of course it's never fun to be on the receiving end of it. But I thought there would be at least a part of him that would kind of get it. Okay, so that's the context. Okay, so those are the three pieces of context that you need in the lead-in to what happened. So basically, about 8 or 9 days ago, Eric was tweeting out something about sort of crypto scaling, or let me just quickly look at what the actual thread was here. He said, Brad Mills said, I'm starting to think Udi is wrong. Liquid and RGB are going to be, fix everything. Toxic wizards crying will be silenced, blah, blah, blah. And then Eric replied to him and said, okay, do you want to do a tungsten bet about this, basically? And then Callisti replied onto that tweet and said, when are you going to take that tungsten cube bet against the BCH podcast? Now, like I've explained, I'm not super interested in being in a tungsten cube bet, but both Callisti and Emergent Reasons have had their version of trolling Eric for attention has been to point out to him, well, if you're so confident in your tungsten cube bets and Bitcoin cashes are so wrong and stupid, why don't you make one against Jeremy, basically, right? And he's sort of, I guess, not responded or refused, not really been interested in that, because, like I explained, firstly, he would have to deal with all of his different copes that he had. But secondly, because he would need something, like I would need to be stupid enough to take a position that he was very, very, very sure I was wrong on. Not even just somewhat sure, but very sure on. So Callisti poked him about that. Then there was a bit more sort of chat in there. Reason blog got into the thread and said Eric Wall's strategy towards confronting the reality that we were right about almost everything is to just ignore it. And Eric said, right about what? That we have to abandon client-side verification in favor of scaling. Have you not heard about ZK proofs? There are lots of ways to achieve what you want to do without making that trade-off. Build a ZK rollup on Celestia if you want scale, you can validate. And then I got in there, and I'm not going to read out the whole thread, but suffice to say, there was a bit of shit talking and discussion of crypto scaling and all of this. Right now, the thread is linked on the slide, so anybody can look it up and read the full thing if you want. Now, Eric got a bit upset in this by my Twitter thread, where I posted that into the thread, and he said, do you actually have any argument, or you just want to link that thread you're linking in every post? So this was the first time, I believe, that he'd actually sort of acknowledged it. And then I sort of asked him to explain to me why ZK rollups was such a great thing, because I did actually have questions. I'm not, obviously I was trolling him with the thread to get his attention, but that wasn't the whole point of it. And then he said to me, look, you're in luck. I've just relaunched my orb. You can ask me a question. Why don't you buy it? There's no bids on it, so you can pick it up for just a few dollars. So I said, all right, fine. I mean, I did think it's a little bit sort of ridiculous that he kind of demanded that I pay for his orb because, and I pointed this out in the thread, because he was saying that I was linking my thread, just sort of trying to avoid the points of an actual discussion. But then he simultaneously did the same thing by saying, well, pay for my orb if you want to have a discussion, right? So he was kind of trying to dodge it himself. But nevertheless, I accepted. I said, okay, sure, fine. I'm, like I said, I've always liked the idea of the orb, and I like the kind of gamification to it. I think it's a cool idea. And if he wanted me to, pay for it, as long as it wasn't an unreasonable amount, then no problem. I'm happy to do that if it would help us actually get to the bottom of this, get an answer, right? So I accepted. I put a bid on the orb. I paid 0.01337 ETH, which is about $20, I think, of ETH or something. Anyway, not a ridiculous amount, like well under $50. Although I will say, Ethereum fees add up fast. Like it was like, swapping my money into ETH already cost me a few dollars, and then putting on the bid on the orb cost like $5 or $6, and then invoking it cost some dollars as well too. So yeah, we are truly blessed on BCH with these low fees, because I cannot imagine anybody trying to use ETH on any kind of regular basis. They would be getting wrecked by fees so fucking fast. But anyway, so I accepted. I put in a bid on the orb, and nobody else was really paying attention to the orb at this time, it seemed, which was a fortunate thing. But Eric had sort of he'd sort of baited the hook a little bit, right? He said, "Why don't you buy the orb and ask me a question?" I said, "Okay, I'll do it." If he'd then gone out and shouted out to everyone, "Why don't you bid on this orb?" then it would have kind of defeated the point, right? If then somebody else had come in and bought it for more, I never would have got to ask my question. And I guess he wanted to show that the orb was a cool thing, or I don't really know why he sort of said you have to pay for the orb instead of just answering, because he spends all day, like he explained in the thread, he said, look, it's cheap and you can, just pick it up now. Like, it's not a big deal. But look, I'll just read his exact words. He said, it's like $3 for the gas fee and the minimum bid is $0. If you want me to educate you on the current status of blockchain scalability and why I'm confident in my observations that Bitcoin Cash makes a lot of unnecessary trade-offs, I think that's more than fair. I have 100 people like you who want to ask me questions all day long. I built the orb so I can throttle the inbound requests I get and publish them all on a mutual platform for it so it's easy to browse. Please respect my time constraints to talk with rando B caches online. So, I mean, again, it's a bit self-contradictory, is that he says, like, I need to gate my time, which is really valuable, but then he says it's really cheap, so there's no excuse not to do it. So again, it's a bit nonsense, a bit ridiculous. But anyway, I said, all right, I'll do it. So I placed a bid, and 24 hours later, I won the orb. So I had a chance to ask a question. You following me so far, Jeff?
Yep. Just watching the chat too. Hello, everyone. I do see your comments. Nice to have you here.
Yeah. Okay. The orb is insane, says Trampic STG. Right. Anyway, so I did the bid and I won the orb. Now I have to give some credit to Eric here. Obviously, we've been antagonistic, but as I've explained, I think the orb is a cool idea. And also, he's an OG Bitcoiner, right? I do have plenty of respect for him in that sense. I also actually quite like Taproot Wizards, as I've explained on this show before. So I think Eric's got a lot going for him, but obviously I can't put up with all his nonsense and cognitive dissonance. Anyway, he sent me a DM about this. This is the first DMs we've ever had. And he said, basically, look, if you win the orb, you can ask even multiple questions, right? Usually you would only get to ask one question per 7-day cycle. But very graciously, he said to me, look, you can ask multiple questions if you want, and I'll answer them in in an honest fashion. Like, just ask some questions and I'll answer them. And he also said, look, like, you've won, so, ask a question. I'm not going to make a big deal about, look, my orb's been won until you've asked the question, because otherwise somebody could, snatch the orb before I'd had the chance to get the question. And given that we'd been through this whole rigmarole for me to ask him a question, it would have kind of defeated the point, right? I mean, that's maybe something that he could improve with the orb. Maybe he could make it that once somebody wins the orb, they have like 48 hours where it can't be auctioned off, and then the auction starts again. I think that would be a cool improvement to how it works, but that's just, one suggestion to avoid this exact scenario. But the upshot is he was very, gracious with me about that. So I have to give him strong credit for that. So I said, yeah, no worries. I was actually about to go to bed at the time when this happened. So I just, stayed up a little later and I wrote the questions. But if he hadn't messaged me, I probably would have noticed until the next day, so forth. So I had the chance to write in some questions. So my questions that I submitted to the orb were in priority order. Number 1, what evidence or change would or could cause you to abandon BTC and migrate yourself plus the wizards to BCH? Number 2, why are BCH moderate block size increases non-viable and/or mutually exclusive with improved layer 2s, e.g. rollups? Question 3, if you were running the BCH podcast, what would your promotional strategy be at the BCH podcast? So he then had 7 days. Like I said, this was about 8 or 9 days ago, maybe 8 days ago. So he then had 7 days to answer these questions as per the terms of his orb oath. Now, in the intervening period, in this 7 days, he's also been launching his Quantum Cats Taproot Wizards NFT mint at 0.1 BTC for over 12.5 million USD in BTC, which has run into a bunch of problems, and they've had to restart it on 3 separate occasions. So I don't know, but I assume he's had a pretty busy week with that. So as it was getting close to the end of the week, I was thinking maybe he's got distracted with this much more important, busier mint, and he's not going to actually follow through and answer. Like, like, of course, his orb premise is that he will definitely answer, but he could always just not, or maybe even just forget if suddenly his other project needed more attention, right?
And how much time?
But
like, wasn't
yeah,
it
go
like
on.
that he had like an hour or something left to reply when he finally, yeah.
Yeah, he hadn't replied with under 2 hours to go. I think he literally answered, in the last few minutes of the week. So again, I have no insight on whether he'd spent the whole week cogitating on it and writing up an answer, or whether he just realized shit, in the last two
Like a
hours
high
and just
school essay that's
busted out a quick
overdue.
answer. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. That's people can speculate, but one way or another, or maybe he'd written it up beforehand and he just thought it would be more dramatic if he posted it right at the last minute. I don't know, but the nevertheless, we didn't get an answer until right up against the final sort of buzzer. So I'm now about to read his full answer, which is 2,500 words, 2,519 words, in quite some detail. I think it's important for the historical context and also for the listeners to be able to hear in full what he said. And then afterwards, we'll obviously go on and discuss my view and so forth. I thought, maybe we could break it down question by question, but I think it's better to just hear from him as he said it, and then everybody can think about what their, point of view is, and then hear my response. So let's do that now. Jed is going to hopefully just scroll through some of this as we.
Yeah, I've got it up now, so ready when you are.
All right, this is, Jeremy's audio book. Welcome to audible.com. I would love, it would have been cool actually to have Eric read it in his own voice. He has a very distinctive voice. But anyway, in lack of that, we're just going to do it.
Wait, we can fake it. We take a 30-second audio clip of him. We do zero-shot voice cloning. We can do the whole thing in like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes.
I don't know. What does the chat think? I think that would be pretty cool. It would also save my vocal cords.
Oh, hold on. To do it right now on this computer, I think would actually probably shut the stream down because it's really resource intensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I wish I had sort of vaguely thought of that beforehand, that we could do an AI gen, but I didn't think of it seriously. Anyway, I'll just read it. So here we go. Eric's response 2 days ago. Quote, I'm going to answer your question truthfully, even though it may not be the answer you want to hear. I think you want the honest truth. I've seen the multitude of threads you've written about me across the years. I understand it is frustrating to see that this many years after the block size wars, even though it is clear as day that all the curtains have fallen for me and that all the rose tint shade has slipped out of my eyes, yet I'm still not able to give the Bitcoin Cash community the nod you're looking for. Underscore, you were right all along. The small blockers were the bad guys. Their technological vision is hampered. Layer 2 scaling leads to too much complexity. Blockstream stakeholders are still to this day trying to steer crucial, possibly sticky economic activity into their corporate sidechain silo underscore. Why is it like this then? Why is that so hard to say? As much as you may like to believe it, it wouldn't be particularly hard for me to admit the above if I truly believed it to be the case. Now I'll instead tell you how I actually feel. First, some background context. During the block size wars, I spent almost all of my time in Stockholm with the local Bitcoin community. My two best friends in the community were Tommy and Hampus. Tommy was a Bcasher. Hampus was a small blocker. Tommy was a r/bch forum moderator, who was such a persistent warrior for his cause that Gregory Maxwell once talked about getting a restraining order against him. Hampus was a Bitcoin Core sycophant, as I think many of us were at the time. One of my longer and most regretted unwritten blog posts was a comparison between the Steelman cases for both sides of BCH versus BTC argument, profiling both Tommy and Hampus as excellent case studies. The reason that they were such good examples for me was that I knew both of them quite closely. I trusted their motivations very deeply. Without going too much into details about each of these individuals, I can wholeheartedly say that there's not a bone in Tommy's body that's malevolent or hell-bent on trying to turn Bitcoin for the worse. All his arguments for Bitcoin Cash were truly because he believed that the best path for Bitcoin forward was a simple block size increase. And he was possibly the most die-hard, longest tenured Bitcoin fan that I knew. I didn't know anyone who was so single-focused on Bitcoin, a benefit of his neurodivergence. Tommy was no fool either. He had been right about future trends with very high precision in the critical cases that mattered. And now, in the fullness of time, when all is said and done, I think back then, during the block size wars, Tommy was right about many more things than I was willing to give him credit for at the time. One of the products of our friendship came in the form of a chart, which plotted what would happen in all edge case scenarios during the BCH BTC SegWit 2x splits during the BIP 91 lock-in activations. I felt uniquely positioned at the time to distill the different outcomes because Tommy had so much knowledge on the big blocker side of things, and Hampus was so deeply knowledgeable about the small blocker side of things. We sat together in multiple cafes and Pizza Huts until we had the final outline on paper. After a few nitpicks by Gregory Maxwell, the chart was complete, and there's a link, and he has this chart that shows everything. I sat many times with Tommy and challenged his perspective on why Bitcoin should scale via increasing the block size alone. What happens after that demand is gobbled up and the fees go up again? We increase it again, Tommy would say. It was clear to me that at the time, many big blockers weren't content with stopping the increase of the block size limits beyond what a normal person or even a well-resourced person could sync on their computer. At some instances, Tommy would say that Bitcoin would still be secure even if something like 20 geographically distributed full nodes / miners were the only entities with the full record of the blockchain. Tommy believed that ultimately the economic incentives of the largest stakeholders of the network would be too strong for it to become corrupted, and that there would always be someone trusted enough to provide users with the hash of the most recent chain tip to fork away if the rules of the network ever became seriously endangered. And if such a thing were to happen, he believed economic forces, such as the ones we've seen with fork futures in the Bitcoin Unlimited case, would be the real arbiter of consensus, not people wearing hats and running fully synchronized full nodes. I'd actually be ashamed at the time to admit how many valid points Tommy made then. Mind you, I'm trying to represent his arguments from memory as far as I'm capable. I'm fully aware that he may feel like I'm misrepresenting his stance completely. It's only in later years that I've actually started to take the devil's advocate side and argue similar to Tommy, that the war of consensus takes place on markets and in pricing, and even at very high block sizes, the real-world mechanics that we use to help us navigate which fork we're buying and selling still work in practice, in the same way that the quote-unquote weak subjectivity problem in proof of stake is ultimately a problem we can practically solve. At the time, I told Tommy the system that he's looking for is EOS, not Bitcoin. This is getting a very long-winded answer, but I'll try to circle back to your questions in a moment. What I believe, and still believe to this day, is that what Tommy proposed was a riskier path. Not only would it force Bitcoin into a weird state where it's secured by a type of game theory that really only very few people would entertain as being sufficient, it would also force a lot of good people out of Bitcoin that I believed then, and do believe to this day, were the most technically capable people in Bitcoin, and made the choices they did out of genuine caution, rather than malice. The quote-unquote evil cabals that people always ascribe as the explanation behind things, I simply don't believe in those stories. Sure, some Blockstream stakeholders are economically motivated. It is completely reasonable that some have had their thinking perverted by this. But the Blockstream stakeholder trying to lure everyone into liquid to siphon fees indefinitely from the new economic world order is a straw man of the small blocker side. It completely misses the genuine individuals, like Hampus, who really simply weren't ready to let go of self-sovereign node running at home until we had at least tried layer 2 scaling. And you see exactly the same kind of nonsense stories being told by Bitcoin maximalists about me and Udi Wertheimer, right? That we're funded by the Chinese government to spam the Bitcoin network. It's either the Jews or the Chinese, whoever you're the most afraid of. I know that I'm a half Swedish, half Iranian European, and I am way too lazy to care about what the Chinese government wants me to do. I vehemently reject such simple, banal explanations for why people act the way they act, because I've seen this bogus rhetoric go wrong about myself as long as I've been a public face on the internet. The layer 2 path of Lightning was, at least on paper, back then, to even many bright folks, something we thought we could get into a workable condition. We haven't by now, and we've failed, but that doesn't mean it was a perverted decision. It is interesting to me that even folks like Andreas Antonopoulos still cling on to this vision of scaling Bitcoin. Most of the people in my intellectual circle have at this point admitted that Lightning is a dead end in its current state. Some now argue that it's only a few new opcode soft forks away before all the kinks are worked out, while I believe that channel-based scaling must be burnt down to the ground altogether. Some believe that it's not Lightning, but now quote-unquote Arc, which is a descendant from Lightning, which will usher the future of hyper-Bitcoinization. I still see what I have always seen, a disorganized soup of people with a great variety of ideas trying to bring this decentralized currency forward, most with good intentions. Number 1. What evidence or change could cause you to abandon BTC and migrate yourself plus wizards to BCH? Let's first talk about this at the social level. The answer to this question is bold: never. Even though Bitcoin Cash community had some valid ideas, many correct criticisms, and its origins stem from many of the longest tenured original fan base, Bitcoin Cash is not the second most interesting project in cryptocurrency to me, nor the third, nor the fifth, maybe perhaps even not the 12th. I think where our disconnect is that it doesn't logically follow for me that simply because the Lightning Network did not work out, I'd be interested in rewinding the clock half a decade and continue on some other fork of Bitcoin. While I don't have a very rosy picture of the Bitcoin maximalists who have stuck their head in their sand for far too many years, as it became more and more clear that the UX challenges of Lightning were steering users into custodial wallets, I actually don't hold Bcashes in very high esteem either. In order for you to understand this, try to picture it from my point of view. The Bitcoin Cash community at large were a group of people who had some reasonable qualms about Lightning, but moments later got duped into believing that a con artist, Craig Wright, was the inventor of Bitcoin. I want you to take a look at these pictures below and refresh your memory. Then he's got a link to the Calvin Air Hong Kong cruise with Craig Wright, Roger Ver, and Dead Alnix. Archive link. While it's true that after some time, some people in the Bitcoin Cash community finally rejected Craig Wright, the fact that so many of people from the BCH inner circle so rapidly got themselves ensnared into Calvin Air's dungeon of thieves and snakes has caused irrevocable distrust for me in those people's judgment. It is not a community I'm seeking to rejoin, nor a chain I am looking to extend. Now let's talk about it at a technical level. The only point where I'd become interested enough to join the Bitcoin Cash community is if the community successfully became stewards and leaders in the type of technologies that I believe will ultimately scale blockchains. If I am to accept that Bitcoin's vision of scaling through Lightning is a dead end, which I've done, my first course of action is try to correct it. This is what we're doing with our soft fork movement efforts at Taproot Wizards. I think we've been making great progress in changing the culture of Bitcoin by introducing new users into Bitcoin with completely different perspectives compared to the Bitcoin maximalists who refuse to observe the certain aspects of reality that's frustrating to me. And what's even better is that our activity on the chain is causing many of these lightning fanatics to revisit their understanding of the Lightning Network. Read this excellent piece by @Ben the Carmen, linked. If those efforts fail, my next course of action is to choose a different cryptocurrency project to be a part of. For me, right now, that would be the Ethereum community or the modular/ZK communities. There are several efforts in crypto right now where the unviability of channel-based systems for scaling are well understood and other directions are chosen, which I believe do carry the potential of achieving the goals of scalability and decentralization at once. Yes, fraud proofs, validity/ZK proofs, and data availability sampling are central elements to achieve this.
Water break. Everyone take a drink.
Number 2, why are BCH moderate block size increases non-viable and or mutually exclusive with improved layer 2s, e.g. rollups? They're absolutely not. You can start building ZK technology and data availability sampling on Bitcoin Cash today. The fact of the situation, though, is that the intellectual mindshare in stewarding those type of technologies are nowhere near Bitcoin Cash, nor have they any interest in being a part of the Bitcoin Cash project effort. Let me turn the question around. Why should there be an effort to build these types of technologies on Bitcoin Cash today among the people who understand those technologies? What do these technologists owe the Bitcoin Cash community? If your answer is, quote, well, because Bitcoin Cash retains much of the UTXO set of Bitcoin and Bcashes were right to fork off from BTC because of the overfocus on Lightning, end quote, well, I disagree. The UTXO set of Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin for which there are ETFs and other things now, is the right destination for these technologies, not the resulting fork of an ancient dispute. Applying these technologies to a current fork of Bitcoin at its current block height would be a more interesting choice for me if it came to that point. There's nothing from the current Bitcoin Cash ecosystem that I want or need buy-in from to develop a better system for the future. And its closest knit community of Bitcoin Cash doesn't have a very strong grasp of the technological future of blockchain I'm interested in. You either have it, Bitcoin does, or get it, the modular/ZK community does. Bitcoin Cash neither has it nor gets it. Number 3, if you were running the BCH podcast, what would your promotional strategy be? I would rebrand it to focus on a type of technology. We're going to make the blocks as big as they have to be, and then also kind of use whatever other technologies are around to scale further, I guess, is not a compelling message. Like I said, you either have it, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or you get it, insert technological scaling narrative here. You either talk about a community/currency that's big and existing, or about a compelling technological vision that's so compelling that others will buy into that vision and are willing to make an off-chance bet that your very different technological vision is so revolutionary that everything else will ultimately have to succumb to it. Right now, Bitcoin Cash is playing not second, not third, not fifth, and maybe perhaps not even 12th flute to other compelling underdog narratives out there. And that's why I wouldn't run a podcast focused on trying to propagate its message. Its message is too worn out. Its brand is too diluted. It is simply not fertile. It doesn't swim. You're not the biggest, and you're not flashy. You're old, sunken, and salty. It is time to end it. ... So what happened to Tommy? Tommy left Bitcoin for good. He did not feel that his vision got a foothold in the market and that humans were too easily misguided by clowns like Craig Wright that he lost faith in decentralized currency projects altogether. Tommy is interested in other technology trends now. There's probably some wisdom in Tommy's decisions, the big fat old autist that he is. End of essay from Eric Wall. All right, how was my dramatic reading, Jet?
I think it was good. I think it covered. Like, I feel like my issue when it comes to reading is I tend to read too fast and then I trip over my words. So the pacing was good and very clear. I don't think it was dramatic enough, though. I'm gonna need to work on that.
Like I
jigsaw.
said, I can't. Yeah, yeah. I can't do Eric's voice. I can't. It's not like Audible, audiobooks or anything. I didn't. Where was Tommy's like voice and Hampus's voice? They should have all had a different voice and a different inflection and all that. Do you have any thoughts on the essay? Just first of all, what was your immediate reaction?
So there's a lot. I mean, yeah, there's just so much here. There are a couple things that I feel like I can agree with, like right up into the point where he's like, I don't know. It's like all of this makes sense, and then he still makes these decisions. And that's where I still don't like the explanation doesn't feel sufficient for the decisions. There's a couple things specifically I think that bothers me. Give me just 1 second to go through this. Okay. So the photo, and I don't think this is the first thing that came to mind, but it's the first thing I'm looking at, scrolling back up. None of those people are really active in the Bitcoin Cash space anymore, right? 3 of 4 are on their own chains. And Roger, I mean, his involvement, I think, over the past 3 years has been attend the conference, do this podcast, have a couple calls with the Bitcoin.com guys.
Yes.
It's really not, I don't know. He's not the figurehead anymore. This thing about just telling someone that the system that they're interested in isn't Bitcoin also seems weird. That recommendation doesn't add up to me. I don't know too much about EOS, but if I remember correctly, when it was launching, it had a bunch of chain halts and freezes and pauses and just network issues, which would have been around the time that Eric's saying to Tommy, EOS is the thing that you're looking for, not Bitcoin. But I don't know if I'm on board with that. Let me see what else.
Anyway, if that's your initial kind of reactions, I'll throw in a few of my thoughts and we can chat it through from there. So I got to say, when I first read this, and I've since read it maybe 3 or 4 times, I was honestly just a little bit disappointed and underwhelmed. Really, I do have to say that thanks to Eric for writing this long response. He did clearly think it through. He answered the questions in a very serious and forthright and honest manner, and he obviously put a lot of effort into it. So I have to give him full credit for that. It is also great to get perspective from outside the Bitcoin Cash community. I considered writing a response, myself in a similar format, but free content is free content. And also I wanted to keep my own listeners in the loop with all of this discussion. I think it's very pertinent to the Bitcoin Cash community as a whole. What I felt like was a lot of it just missed the point, where at the start he says, I've seen those threads that you've been writing about me for years. Well, actually, I mean, it's funny that he says years, because maybe it feels like years in his mind, but it's actually only been 6 months. So I guess the pressure has, ramped up quicker than he expected. But when he tried to, he didn't my point in creating that thread was to troll him enough to get his attention. And I figured that he would get that wasn't just what it was. That once he saw that and he understood it, he would say, who is this guy? Where is all this? Why is he constantly harassing me with all this? Like, there's got to be something else going on here. This is not like, this is some very atypical average hater on the internet. Like, they go into a lot of effort for this. And he would then look into the podcast. What else have I said? Etc. But it seems like he hasn't really done that much of that, even after writing this full 2,500 word essay, because where he said what he thinks I want him to say, which is, you were right all along, small blockers were bad, L2 failed and Blockstream has captured Bitcoin. Yes, that's true. I think that's a point he should get to. But that's not all of it. That's like the first 30% of the story, Once he got to that point, the actual good bit is after that, which is like, okay, I've untangled myself from all this cope and propaganda, and I realized that, so I looked into the podcast, I looked into the Bitcoin Cash community. You guys fought off the BSV people. You fought off XEC, you developed a decentralized governance protocol, you made tons of sick upgrades, cash tokens, Abla looks kind of cool, and wow, like, I'm excited, maybe Bitcoin Cash actually can be the Bitcoin that we all wanted this whole time. Like, what can I do to help? Or at least, wow, you guys are giving it a better run than I expected. How can we collaborate to get crypto to global reserve currency? That's what I was kind of looking for, but sort of didn't get it. It was all like, at the end, he says, you're just salty and out of touch and everything like that. And I can understand how, from his point of view, that's how I seem, because maybe his biggest understanding of me is this thread where I've been trolling him. But that's not just on me. That's also partly on him, which is that if he's not taken the time to look into what I've written or done, of which there's a lot, publicly and easily accessible right there, one click away from this Twitter thread, all he has to do is just click on my page and have a look. Then that's kind of just his own, lack of research, more than anything else. Then it kind of gets onto the ways that he's understanding the block size war. And I can see why he tells it as a story of these two individuals, that he knew. He personifies it a little bit, which I understand, but I think it does oversimplify things, right?
Yeah, and I'm also curious, like, granted, like, I wasn't on r/BCH too much, but I have never heard of this Tommy individual, and I also hadn't seen anyone like reply to this response and saying, oh, I remember Tommy. Like, does anyone remember this Tommy fella? Can anyone pull up a handle? Like, I think it'd be good to get him on the podcast if he's at all interested. But that also, like, I need to believe that he's a real person first.
Oh, I'm sure he's a real guy, but like you say, it doesn't seem like. Well, I also was like, I don't know I know who Hampus is. Not that I, or at least I think I do. I've seen him on Twitter, and he has the laser eyes and some like stupid small blocker takes, So I'm like, okay, that's that guy. Tommy, I don't really know who that is. But when I read that for the first time, I thought Tommy sounds like a BSVer. He dislikes Craig Wright, which is a not typical BSV attribute. But otherwise, he sounds like a big BSVer. He says that, okay, we only need 20 nodes run by the miners, and then the economic incentives will protect everything. And he didn't have any answers to scaling besides just perpetually raising the block size. Like, I was kind of like, where in this story is the actual Bitcoin casher? Yeah. He's got Hampus, who's his laser eye, and Tommy, who is the proto BSV big blocker, there's just this gap. It's like, if this is your understanding of how things went down, you're missing where is the Bitcoin Casher in this, like the 2023 prototype of the Bitcoin Cash? Where is that point of view? Because it's not in there anywhere. And what it does do, though, is it gives me at least some confidence or some feeling is that we're still here in 2024 with like a huge amount of people on the small block side, and maybe in the crypto space generally, who still don't understand that BCH and BSV are different. Like, obviously at the time, maybe that was a large part of the problem, was the fact that the people on the small block size were unable to sort out the distinction between the crazy ones who went on to be BSV and the reasonable ones who were saying, like, guys, let's raise the block size, but we can do this in a sensible manner. And those two things have been conflated for them ever since, even though Eric is clearly aware that BSV is a separate chain and has been for over 5 years at this point, right?
So
I thought, I thought, where's the BCHer in this story? That really, like, the rest of, if you read the rest of it, you're just like, well, where's the BCHer?
Yeah, so okay. Jonas just tagged me in the Bitcoin Cash Telegram group, and Sequest commented on it in the chat here. Tommy is apparently the handle TODU77. I've pulled up their Twitter account. They've had an account since 2013. There are 2 tweets, no followers, no following, nothing. So, Thomas Peck, where are you at?
So not an influential.
There's nothing.
Not
here.
an influential big blocker at any point. But anyway, it just seems to me like
TPDU.
If Eric is telling this story like that, this was how he understood the block size war at this time. But it seems like there was enough chatter online. Surely he should have known that it wasn't as simple as these two caricatures,
Sorry, I pulled up the wrong Twitter account. Just for a quick correction.
Okay.
Tomislav Duganazzik. It's probably horrible. Since 2010, has 3,000 followers. Like 30 of them are people I follow. Bitcoin Cash Autist, old eCash guy. Okay. So maybe there is hope. Maybe we can reach out. See what's up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that would be cool. But all of this really got to me to think. It's what Rizzo said the other day that we reviewed on the show, that BCH is just in its own reality. Like, it's now clear in hindsight that even from the 2013, or pre-split era, there was at least 4 different serious camps of schools of thought, right? There's now BTC, BCH, BSV, and XCC, and all those people in there. And the BCH, XCC, and BSV people were all in one camp from the small blocker point of view. Nowadays, there might even be more, because now there's sort of the Taproot Wizards camp and the Laser Eye camp, and also the CTV camp, and some other camps, and a few people mixed in there somewhere on the BTC side. So as time goes on, we're seeing more and more clarity on what actually the different visions for what Bitcoin is and how to manage it emerge, right? So yeah, I was just a bit baffled that Eric couldn't see those distinctions, and it seemed like his timeline of BCH had just dropped out at about the end of 2019, after he clearly understood that BSV had happened and Calvin Air and all that. He says, like, it took quite a while for the BCHs to kick out Calvin Air, which took about a year, maybe a little bit long, about 15 months, from August 2017 until November of 2018. But then if that's a bit more than a year and there's been another 5 years since, if that was such a substantial period of time, like, wouldn't you, what about the other 5 years? Isn't that a fucking very substantial amount of time? He criticizes BCH as being old, as though that's a weakness rather than a strength. That's Lindy, right? It survived all this time, and here he is writing an answer to a Bitcoin Cash in 2024. Would that have been on his 2017 "We Won the Block Size War" bingo card? Like, I doubt it. So that's actually a strength rather than a weakness. But I understand also why he says, "Look, you're just salty." Again, we've had this Twitter history being the way it is, and if that's all he can see of it, then that's fine, and maybe he just hasn't really watched much of the show. As for the actual answers themselves, question one, like, what could change his mind to get Taproot Wizards on board? He said nothing, never. I was like, what are you talking about? That just seems like a bit of a lack of imagination, really. Like, if BCH flipped Ethereum, would that not be enough to get him to at least look into BCH again? If we flipped BTC, if the entirety of Argentina switched onto Bitcoin Cash, like, never is just, like, come on. Come on. That's just a lack of imagination, I think. Of course, in his mind, it comes down to the technically it doesn't have a gimmick, and socially it's full of all these people. Like, the social part is already handled. Like you said, there's been so much social turnover that barely anybody who's active in BCH now was active then, or secondly, is not the people that he would associate or know of. It's people who might have been involved, but they were under the surface, or they weren't as prominent, and then as far as technically, I think it's strange that he says we need a new shiny technical thing.
Yeah, not even the 12th
like,
most interesting. What are the other 12 fucking projects that are more interesting? Name them all away. Like, if you want to say it's not even the 12th, I don't even think of 12 projects that are like legitimate, not scammy, didn't have an ICO, didn't rug someone. Like, that one kind of offended me. I was like, 12 fucking, what do you mean?
Well, yeah, I think it's ridiculous. I'm not offended by that, but I can sort of see what he's saying. He's the kind of guy who would be like, well, it's BTC, it's ETH. There's kind of some interesting stuff going on with Tether, even if it's a scam, Monero. And then he would just chuck in a bunch of like random shit coins that he's like, well, there's Hex, which is a total scam, but it's interesting in quotation marks because Richard Hart is busy like scamming everyone, and you learn about human psychology and stuff like that. So I can see that he would come up with a list of 12 things, but I think, dismissing BCH out of hand like this is just ridiculous. Yeah, his advice that we should, it's sort of between the first and then in the third answer, he goes on again to say like, you need a technical thing to shill. I'm like, isn't that's the opposite? Like, yeah. Lightning Network was the technical savior of everything on BTC, and he's realized that was a lie and that was stupid. And now he's busy looking for the next thing, and he thinks it's going to be these zero knowledge proofs and maybe on Ethereum. But it doesn't matter what random garbage is the thing of the week. Drive chains, BitVM, ARC, like I can't remember all the other ones. CTV, right?
L-Enhance.
Like what OpCat, yeah. L-Enhance, whatever it is. There's always like some new.
We'll figure it out in 18 months, though.
Exactly, it's only 18 months away, and I feel like this is where his not being a dev really hurts him because, firstly, he listened to all the wrong devs, which was the captured Blockstream ones, who he says, I still think they're the best in the industry. Even after they've lied to him all this time and he started to figure that out, he still thinks they're either the best technically and they're not malicious. Like, even if only one of those things is wrong, he's barking up the wrong tree, let alone both, right? So that's just complete nonsense. And he thinks, look, there can't be any other good devs like anywhere. Well, obviously there can be, because he respects the Ethereum devs.
Yeah.
They're all completely offside with the B2C people, and they've just got their own thing. And then, of course, we also have the actual best devs in crypto. A lot of them are in BCH, but they're just a bit more under the radar, right? As a result of they don't have the clout. They were on the losing side of the block size war, and it's only taken after several splits for them to kind of come into positions of prominence. So I think it's the opposite. I think the fact that we don't have a random technological thing that we're jumping onto every month, yet again, that's not a weakness. That's a strength. That's because BCH just has a good plan. It's simple and it's not fantastic. It's just like, keep it simple, raise the block size, scale to the extent we can, then we'll look into other solutions if and when that becomes a problem. Probably after the other guys have crashed and burned these 10 other alternatives, and we can look at what's actually working out. Plus, I'm sure if we have the actual brain power of the, BCH community onto it, we'll cook up something. It's not going to be like, you already have the smartest engineers in BCH, the ones who couldn't be psyoped and lied to come up with all these weird copes anyway. I'm sure if we needed to build some layer 2s, we could.
It's also weird to me that in point 3, he's like, this isn't a compelling message, but that's not the message of the podcast. The message of the podcast has been, we're following the rise of Bitcoin Cash on its global reserve. Like, did you, like, I don't think he could answer that question without consuming some content, and I do not think he consumed any of the content.
That's right. That's why I was just so, I was like, well, that's not what I'm saying. Firstly, like, if I was going to answer this question, the first thing I would say is like, what are you saying now?
Yeah.
And then like, what's wrong with it? What do you need to change? But he didn't touch on either of those. He basically just said, give up was his answer. His answer was shill a random technical thing or like give up. But it didn't really, it didn't touch on what our existing messaging is doing at all. And to be honest, he's a smart guy. So especially when it comes to marketing and promotion, he's done a fantastic job with the Taproot Wizards. So I was actually kind of like, this was my open slather question for him. This was where I was kind of like, maybe he'll surprise me with something really cool or interesting here. But instead, I just got give up, and I was like, okay, well, you didn't really understand what we're talking. And I also think he's a bit lost on the whole, you need a technological narrative to break through. It's the opposite. The cultural narratives beat the technical narratives any day of the week. We've already seen that with SegWit 2x hats carried the day. It wasn't the fucking specifics of the Lightning Network. It was SegWit 2x hats and we hate Roger Ver, right? And just the same thing in the BCH. Why am I saying following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency? Why am I saying that's a cultural message? Bitcoin is a cultural movement, and then the technology gets added on later, and you need to fix the culture before you fix the tech, and that's the exact problem he's having on the BTC side. But again, all of that just completely over his head apparently. And then when it comes to the second answer, which was the one about why can't we have a moderate block size increase, what's wrong with that, and or like why is zero knowledge proofs the best thing since sliced bread, his answer there also was a bit weird. He basically said, look, you can have both moderate block size increases and zero knowledge proofs, but all the people who are not interested in zero knowledge proof are in Ethereum, which is true. And why would they come to Bitcoin Cash? Like, is there any great reason for that? So those are fair comments, but it completely misses a few things. Firstly, it misses the fact, like, well, what about just the block size increases? He's got no reasoning why that isn't viable. Presumably because, again, his model is Tommy's, gigamegs vision, but a moderate, that's why I specifically said a moderate block size increase. Like, why wouldn't that be somewhat feasible, or at least get us part of the way? He didn't address that at all. And secondly, he didn't do anything to really justify why zero knowledge proofs are actually the answer to everything. He just said, this is the direction I think it's going. So if you're missing on this, like, you're hopeless. Of course, the answer is, do we have big zero knowledge proofs communities in BCH? No. Could we get them? Yes. By the time that we're kicking off with all the other stuff, we've got cooking, the DeFi stuff with cash tokens. We've got, Abla. We've got the peer-to-peer cash stuff, obviously still going with merchant onboarding and so forth. Like, that still needs a bit of a shove, but, as the network effect builds, then sure, some of those ETH devs will come in and we'll have the zero knowledge proof stuff. Is it going to be attractive to them today? No. But, I'm not worried that we're going to be at a lack of people. Again, it's the same. Like, we just have so many good people who don't really understand the human capital concept. I don't mind if BCH doesn't have the foremost experts in X thing, because I know that we have a lot of very qualified, very good technical people. And if we need X thing, everyone will spend 6 months, go do the reading on whatever is the state of the art in whatever, and then we'll have that in PCH, right? We don't need it. We don't need to recruit the experts. We can just generate our own because we just have a good, strong technical community internally, right? So I just feel like all these answers are just like a miss. Like, nothing could get him to change his mind. That's a bit of a non-answer. Number 2 is he didn't touch on block size increases at all, or why that's not viable. And number 3, he just said give up or shill a random technical buzzword. Like, so between all 3 answers, I was just a bit disappointed. I have to give him some credit, right? He is right that many of the small blockers had perfectly good intentions, and I've said as much on this show many times. The issue with the whole blockstream sabotage and so forth is not that all the people on the small block sides are malicious, just that a few bad actors and a few wayward social narratives are enough for everybody else who's a bit naive to follow along and cause a lot of damage unintentionally. Of course, he doesn't really believe in that whole sabotage angle and the blockstream stuff, which is fine. He doesn't necessarily need to be more interested in BCH, but I think it's crazy that he tries to conflate the blockstream sabotage theory with the Chinese miners and Udi and Taproot Wizards sabotage theory. It's so ridiculous. It's like the blockstream conspiracy was floated by the people who were right about everything, from the beginning. So if they were right about all this other stuff, why are they so insistent on this? And number 2, it's been around for 7 years or whatever, 8 years, and there's only been more and more evidence of everything that they predicted coming true, with block streams, side chains suddenly disappearing, more focus on liquid, eventual block size increases that were promised never came. Like, there's a lot of evidence to this beyond even what there was at the time, versus the, laser eyes telling him that he's, sabotaging Bitcoin. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. I know because I'm me. Yeah, but it's also just ridiculous because that's the people who've been wrong about everything else. And now they've cooked up their new latest story of the month, and there's no actual evidence for it. So it's just saying, these guys accused me of a conspiracy and that's wrong, therefore your conspiracy is also wrong. It's like, well, actually, it's just the people who are wrong always are still wrong, and the ones who are right, you just haven't clicked with the rest of it, I mean, if you're going to completely dismiss all that, you have to say that the banks made no attempt to stop Bitcoin, is really what you're arguing, that the banks and governments made zero covert attempt to attack Bitcoin, which is even more of a conspiracy, really. Do we really have to justify that MasterCard invested in Blockstream and then they had a huge hand in Bitcoin development? That's not a big leap, right?
I think it's expected. Like, it's the opposite of a leap, right? Like, when in any company, if you get an investment, all of a sudden you now owe something to this. Of course they're going to tell
Yes.
you what to do.
Yes. You know, but at the end, at least he hits onto some stuff. He's right. You know, BCH isn't new and it isn't flashy. Why? It's just resilient and it works. So I'm really not worried that we're not new and flashy. Now, some other people, you know, some of the earliest reactions I saw from some of the other BCHs was like, a lot of this seems to do with price. He didn't mention price anywhere, and I don't think that played into it personally. But they're just kind of saying, look, if he thinks it isn't exciting and it doesn't have enough vibrancy or it doesn't have a technological narrative, look, if the price pumped and we were back in the top 10 or top 5, you know, that would all be washed aside and no longer a problem, which, you know, probably is right, you know, I would say. So that's kind of my review of it. Now, there was some sort of follow-up. So after this thread came out, it generated quite a bit of discussion, and there was a really good, you know, moment where in some of the we completely missed a whole like section of this, which was I'll touch on that at the end. After this came out, you know, there was some discussion, and I wrote to somebody said like, "Oh, Eric, thanks for telling us this history. You know, it was really interesting to read." And I said, it does have some interesting insight about the history, but it's worth considering that Eric's evaluation of BCH history appears to stop around late 2019 to 2020 sometime. So there are at least 3 years of development unmentioned, which is significant given that the split was around 6.5 years ago. And Eric liked that comment, and then he you know, quoted this bit: Eric's evaluation of BCH history appears to stop around late 2019 to 2020 sometime. So there are at least 3 years of development unmentioned. And he said, "I admit this is correct, and I have more to learn." Also, Bitcoin Cash Audist told him all about all the upgrades that have been going on, and a couple of other people commented. And so at the end of all of this, you know, all the criticism I just had of his essay, it seems like we got the message through. It seems like he finally realized, I got to take the BCH community seriously. I'm missing something. I need to just humbly slow down, take a look at this. And my view of BCH is like what was happening, you know, just barely post BSV. And that was at least, you know, 3-4 years ago. Maybe things are different now. I need to have a look at that. So that's really what this has been all about. And I'm just thrilled that we've got to that point. You know, I think maybe finally he'll watch a little bit of the podcast. If you are Eric, like you know, I doubt, unless you get up to something really stupid, I'm probably not going to need to be trolling you on Twitter so much. You know, hopefully we can work through the rest of your copes and disagreements and so forth, you know, a bit more civilly from this point forward. But that's, you know, I'm glad we've at least got to that point.
So if
now one other thing that I want, go on.
So if his like knowledge of the BCH history stopped pre XEC fork, right? We started doing the podcast,
or maybe just after, yeah.
Yeah, like he should just start episode 1 and then go through the whole thing. He'll be completely up to speed.
Yeah, it picks up. Yeah, it'll be completely up to speed, and he'll just be able to see how consistent we've been as, you know, various BTC narratives have all fallen apart. He can think back to them in real time. Yeah, there was one other little part to this that we didn't mention as well earlier. So I guess I forgot to do a slide on it. So in between the bit where when I got control of the orb, right, I bought it and I had to ask my questions. So I asked my questions, and then, like I mentioned at the start, I went through and made all of the previous answers public. Most of them were private. Like I said, there was that guy, Paul.eth, who'd paid like 15 ETH to ask all these questions, a lot of them about what's the best way to get into investment rounds and yada, yada, yada. But I got control of the orb, and I was like, firstly, one, I don't have time to read all of this before somebody else will probably snatch it back. And two, I'm not just going to screenshot them and hoard it up to myself, whatever. So I just published all of them to publicly. Now, after I did that, then I messaged Eric and said, look, I've asked my questions, looking forward to reading the answers, and I made the rest of the answers public. He then went on his Orbland account and said, look, Bcasher has asked, this new question. I think he said that. But what he said was also, somehow, in quotation marks, somehow the BCH podcast got control of Eric's orb and then made all the other answers public. So he basically tried to create this like fake drama about it because he knew exactly that I was getting control of it. He challenged me to buy it and I bought it. And then he even gave me a heads up, like, make sure you ask the questions before, we do anything about it. But then he he tried to like invent this little drama about it as though I'd like super hacked his orb or like something like that. And it worked. Like a few people were like, wow, how did this guy get control of the orb, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's fair enough. Like he was just trying to build hype for his orb and stuff like that. But it was just funny. He didn't know that I was going to make all the answers public, but he knew that that was a possibility, right? That's in the rules of the orb, like I explained. So I wonder whether that caught him off guard, whether he was expecting me to do that or not. But either way, I made them all public. And then I guess he thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to, drive some more interest in my orb. So anyway, he said like somehow I did that. And then even like some BCH people were in there like, what do you mean? Like, what? As if Jeremy just got control of it. And then I was like, no, but I did that. So it was like this. That was like a fake drama. But yeah, I got control of the orbs and I made it. And then he was like reposting that from his own account and he was trying to like stir it up as well too. So I don't know whether that was just a marketing thing or what. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was just to clear up anybody who was confused about that. And people were saying like, "Oh, Jeremy, why did you like publish all the answers?" Again, I was just like, I don't even have time to read them, and I don't care. Whatever, let's just get them all out there. And
it's also funny.
You can go back and read them. Yeah. I was just kind of like, well, now I'm the real orb fucking master, But that was in the rules of the orb though, so it wasn't like I didn't break anything or I didn't do anything untoward. This was not some, maybe it's a bit dog to the one previous guy who paid loads of ETH for his answers, but he also knew that that was the rules of the orb when he bought it, so there's no reason that I couldn't do that. And now, so jumping forward back in time to after the orb answer was given, then a lot of other people started commenting on all this, right? And I want to just, we're not going to read out or go into the details of what anybody else reacted with, but just a couple of points to hit on. So this one guy, Hector Lopez, who is this very like toxic BSV guy, he reacted to this post by quoting, Eric Wall has admitted that the big blockers were right, and his evidence for it was the section that Eric said, you want me to say this, but I'm not saying this. And then what he said. So it was just the most dishonest, like, narrative creating by this guy, Hector Lopez. Again, like, I don't want to paint the whole BSV community, based on the actions of one guy, but he is a BSV guy, and that was just so typical that he was trying to get some like vindication, which was fake anyway. It was a fake news that Eric thought that. In fact, Eric had written 2,000 words explaining why he didn't think that, and the guy had just either ignored or misunderstood, but probably just ignored that to try and get his like shitty Twitter dunk in. And that was just terrible behavior. And so then people are commenting, being like, no, that's not what he said at all. And it turns out that I just checked just before the show. He then even ended up deleting this tweet. So the moral of the story here, though, is that Eric was confused about the big blockers being the same as BSV. The BSV people immediately did us a huge favor by fucking taking his words out of context and giving the BCH community a perfect opportunity to say, these guys are crazy. We're not like that. And I want to emphasize that to the BCH community, that now that things are starting to improve in the BCH scene, firstly, you have guys like this asshole, Hector, trying to jump on our clout and say, yeah, see, the big blockers were right. We're big blockers too, guys. Like, even if it's like, no, you're still wrong. You're still crazy and wrong. Sorry. So they're going to try and, what's it called? Stolen valor. They're going to try and get some stolen valor in there. But secondly, it's a perfect opportunity for any bullshit that they pull for the BCH community to demonstrate that we're not on board with that. We don't like that. And we rejected that for a reason. And to look like the more mature, positive, optimistic, and reasonable ones that you can discuss crypto with properly. So I urge everyone, we need to set that bar really high so that the rest of the world finally gets it clear what the difference is between BCH and BSV. And there's the reasonable, intelligent big blockers who are now being vindicated. That's us. And there's the absolute nonsense crazies who you don't want to have anything to do with. That's BSV, right? So please, let's all just lead by example and get that clear to everybody. Now, secondly, was in some of the commentary below that, I had some discussions with a BTC guy who was still very traumatized about the whole block size war. And he was coming up with all this stuff like, but you just, BCHs, all you do is just come and troll Bitcoin and, you're always talking shit about us and you never do anything else and blah, blah, blah. And I was explaining to him, like, yes, it is true that I criticize BTC. Sometimes, I poke people here and there. I have my criticisms of you, yes. But you do realize that that's a small percentage of what I do, right? Like, outside of you're seeing that because that's the crowd you're in. So you only see at the edge where I'm criticizing someone, right? You don't follow me. You don't know what's going on in the BCH community. Most of my time is actually spent on BCH stuff, and very little of it is spent on these little battles with BTC people. But he couldn't really understand that, and I said, look, there's a whole different world going on of BCH discussion and BCH tech and BCH apps and stuff, and that's mostly what I'm doing. There's just a small amount of this. And then he was kind of like, price chart. You always get him with the price chart. He comes in with the price chart. I said, dude, this is irrelevant. This is like years ago. What? No, I don't care about this price chart. Why do you care about this price chart? And then he was like, well, because on 2019, I was the biggest poster on RBDC. I know what the Bitcoin Cash community is. I know you guys are all wrecked at blah, blah, blah. And I'm taking my victory lap or something. And I was like, dude, this is years ago. You're just so out of touch with everything. It doesn't matter anymore. And he was still just riled up and all that. Now, the lesson that I want to, draw out of this situation is that the BCH community has done a lot of work internally to process everything from the block size war and all what, we did right and what we did wrong and what we need to do differently and how we can be positive and differential going forward. Well, the BTC side, they've got a lot of that as well too. And they haven't actually processed very much, if any of it, Like we can see here, Eric's actually giving a good example of he has actually worked through this Lightning Network was wrong and so forth, so forth. But he's still at the stage like BCH didn't really have anything, going for it kind of thing. But anyway, some of these BTC guys, they're still just trapped in there. Yeah, we're going to be right and we showed them and all that. And they're going to project onto us the fact that they're still stuck in the past, right? They're going to say, you guys are toxic and you're always arguing with us. And why don't you just go off to your own project and like all this stuff that it's nothing to do with us. And in fact, we shouldn't, we should and are focusing on our own project. But that's they still need to have all that toxicity and stuff from the old days. So when you see those people, and I'm sure you will, you're interacting in the broader crypto discussion, just try, be trying reasonable with them and just say, look, you've got your project, we've got our project, just do it your way. Like, we're not involved, everything. And if they keep coming at you, then eventually just drop it, right? If you fight with a pig, nobody wins, but you both get dirty, right? That's kind of what they're just going to try and drag you into. And the way they will have to deal with their own, project and their own failings and their own misconceptions and whatever on their own time, because we don't have time to deal with it. To the extent that they're interested and receptive, they can come over to the BCH community and we can help them, see things in a more positive light. But for the ones who still just are stuck in that old, like, they have all these sayings like, oh, BCH, nothing's going on and nobody's doing anything and it's a dead coin, and you're like, okay, just leave us alone then. And then that only riles them up more, because it starts the cognitive dissonance clanging in their mind, like, I'm telling this guy he's dead and he's telling me to go away. Like, why is he doing that? Like, should he be getting salty and no, we're not dead, no. So yeah, you just tell them that, because there's going to be a lot of those upset people, there. So and it's going to get worse for them too, because not only can they say BCH is dead and nothing's going on, that's already false, but trying to explain that just triggers them. But it's going to get worse once the BCH price starts going up, because then they're going to be like, their little precious price chart myth is going to start crumbling before their eyes too, and then it's going to be even worse. It's not even like, not only is BCH alive, it's actually starting to fucking take our hash power, right?
We're going to have an Uno reverso moment. Someone will give us a price chart. Yeah. Here's a new price chart.
Exactly. So just anyway, that was a lot of the discussion. Do you have any thoughts about any of that, Jen? And a lot of other people were reacting as well too, which is going back to why this was all such a big deal. Why have we done a full podcast episode just on this? Because Eric's got a big voice and a lot of people are paying attention to what he's saying. So the fact that he has finally started to at least engage in the discussion a little bit with the BCH community, that's a big turning point, I think.
I'm just considering like that, let's talk about the social nothing. Well, I wonder if this is kind of that religion parallel again. Like, if someone was saying you're worshiping a false god, how likely would you be to be like, okay, here's what it would take for me to convert? Because I think even like entertaining that idea is to some degree an admission of defeat. So I think I understand the hesitancy there, but that's about it. The other comment, I don't really, my response, like my reaction to everyone else's comments was like, wow, people actually do care about what this guy has to say. I thought this was just we got podcast exclusive kind of storytelling going. Yeah. I don't think it's weird too, because I have been blocked by Udi for like 4 or 5 years. So
yeah, well, me too. Not for 4 or 5 years, but yeah, me too. But Eric's the smarter one anyway. Like, to be honest, that's what I mean. As if you can't already tell, like, Udi just follows Eric's takes. Like, Udi knows that he's the dumb one and Eric's the smart one, and you can even hear that in the clip, with Vitalik, where Eric, Vitalik's like, why don't we do 32 megabyte blocks? And Udi's like, Eric, you're gonna say something? It's like he doesn't know. So that's why if we win over Eric, then Udi will just follow along. Somebody said in the chat, like, Eric should come to BCH Bliss, and it's funny you mentioned that, because Fiendish and a couple other people said then in this following on discussion, like, Eric, if you want to come see what the BCH community is like these days, come check out BCH Bliss. And maybe he will. That would be super cool. I would love to see him there. Eric, please come along. I'll say hello to you, and don't worry, I'm not gonna be that toxic with you. I'm a pretty approachable, fun guy, and yeah, don't need to troll you to get your attention if you're at the BCH Bliss, that's for sure. So, yeah, come along. It would be sick, and maybe even he just watch some of the online live stream and at least see where the BCH community is at these days. Anything like that is all to the good, I think, really. And once again, it just comes to the BCH community. We just got to lead by example and show that we're doing the right stuff to actually keep the Bitcoin mission on a strong forward trend there. Which cuts to community comment of the week. Callisti said, so this is from some reactions after Eric posted his answers, was Callisti said, we need Ethereum unicorn rave parties. Well, imaginary username said, we always need to be even cooler and even flashier, which is what Eric recommended. Callisti said, we need Ethereum unicorn rave parties. And imaginary username said, best we can do is a bunch of awkward nerds shuffling around Ljubljana trying to avoid eye contact, which got 7 laugh emojis and 3 smile emojis. So for anybody who's wondering, don't worry, like it will actually be very sociable, but it's funny. Imaginary username to phrase it that way. So yeah, go get your ticket, www.bliss.cash. And I made a video yesterday, I think I released it, which walks through, it's on the Bitcoin Cash podcast YouTube channel, which shows you exactly how to buy a Bliss ticket. So if you're like, I don't know about TapSwap, I don't know about NFTs, I don't know about any of this, if you're confused about it, I've done a full guide breaking it down. So just go on YouTube, look up the Bitcoin Cash podcast, you'll see it right there. And that will show you exactly how to buy an NFT and get a Jessica and get in the crypto spirit for the upgrade day. All right. Do you want to do a little bit of other news, Jet? You don't have to run. We got a little bit of extra time. Do you want to
We got some time.
quickly talk a couple other things? Okay, all right. So I've got 3 other quick little bits of news here. Slide doesn't have a picture. I didn't have time to make it all look pretty. Mark Lamb is shutting down his exchange.
I thought this was
OpenX.
hilarious.
You've got 2 weeks to withdraw. So another scam has been successfully executed. I mean, a few people will be getting burnt and getting rugged, losing their money, whoever believed in OpenX. But yeah, hopefully he's long gone from the BCH community and good riddance. But yeah, it's just classic, like scammers are going to scam, right? All that, no, CoinFlex is not a scam. We just, excuses and lies. Goes off to do OpenX, fresh batch of shilling, fresh batch of, this is the new frontier, guys. We got it right this time. Nope, scammed again,
Yeah, and I think I was reading that it had something to do with the 3 Arrows Capital people, and like how FTX. Oh, I can't even remember. I'm not going to say anything because I'm like working on like a quarter. I was like half asleep reading my phone in the morning. But check it out. It's a wild ride.
Yeah. Suju and Carl Davies, Mark Lamb, scammer team extraordinaires, OpenX. Well, they've all shut down another exchange. So great work, guys. Once again, not your keys, not your coins. As per the video that we'll show you on TapSwap, exactly how to do that. And yeah, avoid custodians. And really, imaginary username was talking about this too. It's up to the BCH community. We do have to set the bar higher. We're in a good place now. We need to not lose that, right? We've learned those lessons the hard way over and over enough times. So if new people are interested, like for instance, Eric, right? If he's interested in coming into the BCH community, well, he's very welcome to come and see what we're working on and be part of it. But it's not like if he says, yeah, I love BCH, that everybody should be, Eric's involved, like straight away. It should be like, well, take a number, join the line. You've got to earn your way back in with proof of work and time. He's a bit more of a known quantity than many other people would be, but one way or another, people are going to be coming to the BCH community, and that's okay. Everybody comes with a bit of a fresh slate and should be able to earn some respect, but they need to do it the right way with proof of work and with Lindy over time to be believable. And we can't get sucked in with more frauds and scams. Whether it's bloody Mark Lamb or anyone else, right? Speaking of which, it occurs to me, I think it's tomorrow or maybe the day after that the Copa case is starting with Craig Wright. Is going to probably get massively exposed in the lawsuits with Coinbase and all of them. So I guess we'll do some more coverage of that once it all comes to pass one day. So yeah, I think it is literally starting tomorrow. But yeah, we'll have more coverage of that as it comes about. Any thoughts on that, Jett? Any predictions for ye old Copa case?
Did you see the letter from Craig that was like, we'll settle this if you guys just admit, if you just write this letter?
You just write this letter. I know that Craig gave them some kind of he said, like, let's call it all off. Like, we can sort this out. Just admit that I'm Satoshi and like some other, like, all the patents were mine all along. I can't remember the exact terms, but it was basically like, if you just agree that I was right about everything, then we don't need to have the lawsuit under which the context is you don't agree about all these things.
Yeah.
Like, as though he had loads of leverage when he's about to get steamrolled, right?
I think it's like there's a specific, I think it's like pre-written paragraph that's like, here's essentially what you're supposed to say, and you're supposed to say it publicly. I don't think anyone's gonna say any of that shit. So I think Craig will lose.
And then they told him
to
like shove it.
Yeah.
yeah. They told him to shove it, and they were like,
"See you in court."
Like what? Yeah, but it was so funny because it's once again, it's the weirdest like narratives. Craig and CoinGeek and stuff. They tried to phrase it as, well, look, let's just settle this now. Like, let's just wash our hands of everything. You can do your thing. We'll do our thing. It doesn't need to be a big deal. It's like you're just standing there and you've just been like stabbed over and over and over and over and over by someone. And finally you're like, fucking stop. And then they're like, no. Let's just call it quits. Let's just call it all off. It's all good. There's no need to be upset. It's like, no, this whole Copa thing is only happening because you just were creating grief for everybody for years on end, incessantly. We finally come to put a stop to it. And now you want to be like, let's just call bygones be bygones and bury the hatchet if you admit that I was right the whole time.
There was an old CoinGeek article too where it talked about how Craig has just been trying to prove that he's Satoshi in court, and none of these lawsuits are going to court. So he can't. And like now, Craig is going, let's do this outside of court.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see that man get stomped.
Yeah, can't wait. It's going to be good. Okay, BitBoy also did a video about Bitcoin Cash and about the whole blocksize war just kind of out of nowhere. Now, he's been in his own hot water. Again, I don't know the whole details, but he essentially got ejected from his own BitBoy channel. And there's been much and various drama about that. I don't know all the details, but he says, he lost some money or he was pushed out by some people that hated him for whatever reason. And they say that he was up to all kinds of dodgy stuff. And he was sort of in rehab for like being an alcoholic at a certain point and his marriage breaking down. And like, I really don't know the whole story, but nonetheless, he's rebranded to himself as just, I'm Ben and I'm doing crypto content. And as part of that, he already has quite a lot of sway. He already had 90,000 YouTube subscribers out of nowhere, which I guess is not the same as his 1 million BitBoy account, but somehow he's retained enough clout in this whole shambles, and he did a video about the blocksize war, and he got pretty much most of it right, which was great to see, because it was just another case of one, Bitcoin Cash still finding its way into the conversation, and two, over time, the truth wins over time, slowly, but it wins over time. Like this video got, I don't know, 8,000 views or something like that, and that would be a lot of the people that are in crypto that don't really know all the details in it. He said, look, Roger Ver didn't start BCH. He just joined up to them, and there was so much censorship, and it was slandered, and yada, yada, yada. A lot of stuff that getting those opinions out there from non-BCH, channels to listening ears is just fantastic and really helps with our general perception in the overall crypto community, right? So it sort of reminded me of when Andre Jick did his video a couple of years ago. Seeing more things like that starting to happen really is just a payoff for the fact that the BCH community is still here, still plowing away, and still putting in good work, no matter the slander. Eventually, the media coverage has to turn around to recognize and match that. And I was really glad to see that. One thing that BitBoy did get wrong at the end was he kind of said, yeah, the BCH community is a bit dead though, and it's not really doing anything, which again, just like Eric, he just is obviously mostly out of the loop of what's happening. And I commented on the video and said, yeah, that's not really accurate. There's actually quite a lot going on. And he said, oh, okay, cool. So maybe he'll look into that. Yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts? You told me you hadn't seen it yet, right?
Yeah, hadn't seen it. Actually, haven't watched any of BitBoy's crypto content except for like 3-second clips that people goof on him, like on Twitter. So
yeah. Well, he does a lot of shilling of random garbage. So yeah. I'm not saying that he's going to be the world's best BCH spokesman now or ever, but just, the fact that he did this fairly accurate video I'll take it. It's a W. And then we also have just like fail of the week. I didn't do meme of the week, but this is actually meme of the week, is the swan.com guys, who are this sort of laser eye company that helps people invest in BTC. And they make a big deal about we're not shitcoiners and BTC is the king and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, Bcashy posted the clip from Kim.com debating on the Swan Cafe Bitcoin in 2021, where the guy that he's talking to says to him, wouldn't, is BCH the gold or the dollar? Is it more like cash or like the dollar? And Kim says, well, it's more like the dollar. And then the guy says, well, it sounds to me then like BCH is a bigger threat to the dollar than BTC is. And it's like they scored this own goal because Kim was like, yes. And the whole Bitcoin Cash community was like, yes, that's what we've been trying to tell you this whole time. And the guy is just tied himself into knots explaining how the traditional financial system is actually a good thing because they're going to be on the BTC side and they're going to treat it just like gold and not manipulate it. And wow, isn't it great that Michael Saylor loves us? And aren't we still revolutionary, but just inside the system? Right. So anyway, they had that debate, right? And that clip was actually featured in the Bitcoin Cash podcast intro in 2022 from 2021. Anyway, Bcashy reposted it. Then one of the guys from Swan quoted it and said, is this true? He thought this had been invented. And one of the other guys said, I don't think anyone has ever said this, or at the very least, no one believes this. And then it was replied that no one in the team has said it is a possibility, but where does the certainty about their beliefs come from? And like so these two dudes are just like on the Swan team, confused, wondering how we've cooked up this fake discussion of them and of them admitting that BCH is actually more of a threat to the system than BTC. So I got in there and replied and said, guys, we've we've got all the receipts, and I linked them to, firstly, the recording, which they don't have anymore because they deleted it. That was the whole point. They did this debate with Kim. They got absolutely wrecked. Then they deleted their own debate, or they edited it to cut out the section with Kim because they were so embarrassed about it and because got wrecked that hard. They deleted it, and now 2 years later or 3 years later, they can't even believe that it ever even existed. But at the time, the BCH community rescued the content, and I reviewed the entire debate on this show on episode 12. If you look back, you'll see episode number 12 is called censoredkim.com. Let me see here. I'm just loading up the title of it. It's called censoredkim.com BCH versus BTC debate commentary. So you can go back and listen to this episode in full to hear the full debate and my commentary at the time. And if you're new to the show and you have only been listening a while, go listen to something like that and you'll be like, fucking banger. Like, the BCH narratives have not changed, and the BTC all completely contradictory and falling in on themselves as per usual. But anyway, it's just so incredible that how deluding of yourself is just happening at multiple levels. They were arguing for the banksters in their clip. They got wrecked by Kim.com. Then they deleted it and censored it and tried to cover it up. And now they can't even believe that any of that ever happened. Like, it's just so much delusion. It's crazy, right?
There was a moment where I thought that we were confusing this with the Mark Cuban, like, pro BCH thing where he's talking about St. Kitts adoption.
No, that was a different thing.
Yeah, no, I realize that now. But there was like a moment where I was like, I think they might be right. And then, after I double checked that, I went to that thread and was like, wow, it's been 3 days and no one has said anything after they've posted evidence. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't reply. Tells everything. They didn't reply at all.
Amazing.
They didn't, like, that just, I don't know, they didn't block me or anything, so they might have muted me, but really it's just when your L's are that big, there's, like, anything that they say is just adding fuel to the fire, and them trying to sort out this cognitive dissonance of, like, guys, is that right? Did we delete our own debate that we got wrecked on? Like, oh, I can't even imagine those guys trying to sort it out amongst themselves. Anyway, that's collapsed BTC lies as per usual.
We've got
message.
Go on. We've got a comment in the chat here from the Glitch. Speaking of Kim, what was his killer app? He never really came through on that, which was disappointing. I'm pretty sure that's Cash Rain, right?
Yeah, well, he had two. He had one that he said was going to be File Shop,
right,
which was going to be like a sort of pay to unlock Google Drive IPFS type of content. That never really came to pass. So, yeah, he just sort of didn't deliver on that. The other thing was Cash Rain, which exists, and you can try it out. Go to cashrain.com. It took him longer than he, sort of initially said, but he did actually deliver it. And it's still in live beta, and it works. It's not taking over the world just yet, but it's still a pretty decent app, and it goes to show that he does have his own BCH devs, and he made it, and it works, and it's been useful for some things. So, yeah, it hasn't taken over the world yet, but it exists. Cashrain.com. Check it out, and we've covered it several times on this show at different points. Okay, well, that will pretty much do it, except for message to the community. Do you have a message to the community you want to give?
Go to Bliss. I'll see you at Bliss. If you want a better message, I'll talk to you at Bliss.
There you go. You got to rock up to Bliss. And my message is, I'm glad that we finally got Eric to pay a little bit of attention, and there'll probably be more of other people will start to get the drift that they need to look into the BCH community, either as a direct or indirect result as this kind of plays out. So really just be excellent. Set the standard for BCH very high, because public interest is going to be growing. So wherever possible, don't just be trying to do dunks and arguing and anything salty, being reactive or emotional. I understand some of the time you need to make some points. Like if they say, you're always shitting on BTC, like, Don't say, no, I never did, because that's not true. Just say the truth. Say, yeah, I did a bit, but that's not really all of what I'm doing. That's just something I have done in the past, yes. But I also talk a lot about BCH. Have you looked into any of that? Do you know all the exciting stuff that's going on in BCH? And just keep it focused on being positive and forward-looking for us, because people are now starting to come to us. We had to go out there and stir up some shit back when everybody was trying to ignore us, but that's the worm has turned. People are starting to come to BCH now, so we're in the luxury position of being able to say, yeah, cool, come in, be a part of this, take a look at what we're doing. And some people will love it and will jump in and contribute, and if they put in a lot of Lindy and they're not out there rugging and scamming, great. And if they are coming in and they're trying to cause trouble, then just say, look, this is Bitcoin Cash is not about that. It's not about whatever bullshit you're trying to pull here, and we're not interested. Just go do it somewhere else, and just very politely try and exclude them from the discussion and from the community, because you get what you tolerate, right? So
I'm gonna
just try and tolerate the good ones.
I want to tag on to that. You said the be great. So there's a guy that I've been following since probably before I got into cryptocurrency, like 2015, maybe 2014. His name's Eric July. I'm sure some of our listeners are going to be familiar with him. He's recently been doing comic books, which is not really where my interest is, but probably around 2016, he was putting out music with a band called Backwards. Now, Eric is a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, and all of the music that he has written also kind of has that message. But there's one song, I think it's just called Be Great. Go check it out. And if you like it, check out the rest of the catalog, because all of the lyrics are kind of in that, self-ownership, accountability, trying to make the world a better place and reduce the state. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that'll pretty much do it for the show. Thank you to our donators. Thank you to our patrons, Ricky, HP, and Digital Checo. Thank you to our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. Flipstarter is coming. I didn't have time to do it this week, but now I've delivered that tap swap thing as well too, so that will be coming. Thank you everyone for watching. Check out the start guide, FAQs, and links at www.bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, listen to episode 85. If you need a BCH wallet, try Selene wallet at selene.cash. If you want to come meet everyone and get involved in it, 14th and 15th of May in Slovenia, Bliss, www.bliss.cash. Really make sure you get the www dots in there. I still need to fix the DNS. Haven't had time for that. And final shout outs, Jett. Any final shout outs?
Ooh, so I want to give a shout out to John Moriarty. I am blanking out on what his YouTube channel is.
Bitcoin Out Loud.
Bitcoin Out Loud, yeah. Yeah, that's how. You don't need to talk about why, but shout out to you, John.
And my shout out goes to Eric Wall, mate. I hope you're hearing this. I hope you've watched this episode of the show, thought it over a little bit, and I'm sure we can be much more civil now. If you're willing to engage, then I don't need to troll you so much. But if I knew any other way to do it, I would have. But the nice, polite, friendly, let's have a discussion way wasn't working and didn't seem like it would ever work. And I'm sure you're aware that you had a lot of copes and false beliefs into the mix as well too. So you've got through a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it. And also we're in a better spot now too on the BCH side. So very glad to be able to have some dialogue with you. And anytime you want to be part of the real Bitcoin, still here waiting for you to get involved. All right, that'll do it. Thank you for listening, everyone. Until next time.
So I started realizing that if you can just find strength just a little bit longer, you will have a crew of people following you along the way.
And that is another thing that no one can ever teach you. Because you're going to have to learn that on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that energy out of your mind on your own. There's no book you can read that all of a sudden I have it. I've got the technique now. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
No, it's a grind that you have to start and finish on your